Hello and welcome to Crux Investor. We're caught up earlier today with Hayden Locke, president of Marimaca Copper, and he talks us through organising things in 2020 to be able to hit the floor at speed in 2021. And if you want our thoughts and opinions on their plans for 2021, the company itself, and the conversation, you can find that at cruxinvestor.com/club, where you can also find detailed company reports. There's commentary from experts from around the world on a variety of commodities and companies, which you might find interesting, plus training courses to help you with your own diligence. There's summaries of other interviews that we've done to save you some time. And of course, you can drive a thriving community of investors sharing their thoughts and ideas with each other in a safe environment, free from trolling, abuse, and judgment. Wouldn't that be nice? So go and join them at cruxinvestor.com/club. We'd also like your thoughts. So do give us a like, we appreciate it. Leave your comments below. We'll get back to absolutely everyone. And of course, if you want to see what we talked about today, take a look in the description. Hayden, how you doing, sir?
Very well.
Good to see you. Did you have a good Christmas?
It was an interesting one. You know, coronavirus keeps delivering plenty of interesting twists and turns, but it was good. Can't complain.
Fantastic. And of course, over this side of the pond, we've had a lot of snow. Well, I say a lot of snow. Pathetic by anyone else's standards, but it changed the mood somewhat, didn't it?
Yeah, it's always funny how people get so excited about a little bit of snowfall in the UK. It also causes everything to grind to a halt, which I particularly find amusing.
You always want what you can't have. We don't get a lot around these parts.
Exactly.
Well, look, hey, Hayden, we haven't spoken since September, I think. So a few things have happened within Marimaca. So we're going to catch up and talk about that. But before we do, give us a 1-minute overview of the business for people new to the story, and we'll pick it up from there.
Yeah, we're developing the Marimaca Oxide Copper Project, which is in northern Chile, near the regional centre of Antofagasta. We delivered a PEA last year in August, which really highlighted what we describe as very unique characteristics amongst development stage copper assets. Very, very low capital cost of production, meaning that we can finance it because of its location, very low execution risk, and really outstanding economics, even at a $3 a pound copper price. And obviously, given a little bit of a tailwind in the copper universe at the moment, our economics look better and better with every day that goes by.
Yeah, I think it's saying most copper developers and producers are favour at the moment. Look, I look back at 2020 and, you know, I think for people who want to hear your business plan, strategy, talk about the team and, you know, the assets in some detail, they can go back to the previous conversation we had in September and put the link below. But I'm kind of interested in, you know, what's your take on 2020? So you're relatively new to the company. You were brought in to be market facing, help with the financing, those sorts of things. You know, and there's a pretty well established team, and you know, as the PA would suggest, you know, you've got the beginnings of quite a good asset there. But what was 2020 about for you?
It was really about resetting the story. I think when I had been following the story for quite a while, and it was fairly clear that this was going to be quite an interesting copper asset, just regardless of whether or not the copper price had a run. And so I was excited about it, and I was genuinely surprised at the lack of interest being shown in it from the market. And I think that was a variety of reasons behind that. And so 2020 was really about cleaning up the story, removing some of those legacy issues that had been surrounding it, you know, a bit of debt off the balance sheet, cleaning it up, rebranding it so that people realise that we're focusing now on a development strategy for Marimaca, for a slightly larger project rather than our previous strategy of small-scale copper development, and then really about delivering the PEA and taking us through the next financing to get us prepared for 2021. And so 2020, we actually achieved all of our goals and got ourselves set up, and now the work starts again in 2021.
It does. It's relentless. You got to keep going. Just on 2020, so what were the things that you think were most important and that you particularly are pleased with? Because, as you say, when people do name changes, it's just that it's like we're slightly embarrassed about what went before. The market has a perception which just persists and won't go away. So obviously, name change helps, but the fundamentals need to be looked at too. Your balance sheets you talked about with Greenstone, etc., needed to be tidied up. But what were the things that you really honed in on and you think will make a difference going forward?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think a name change without the delivery on the execution side is completely pointless. And so it was part of a bigger plan, which was forget what had happened in the past and focus on what we're going to do in the future. I think we're very happy with the delivery of the PEA, which showed exactly what we had always known about the Marimaca project, which is really that it is a standout project in many ways in the copper industry. I mean, the only aspect that it's really not a standout is in scale, in terms of its scale. It's still a large project, but it's just not the enormous scale that a lot of investors love to see. So we're very pleased with our ability to deliver that from a standing start. And then I think really our focus has been on communicating what our value creation strategy was going to be over 2020, and then communicating that effectively as we achieved, as you said before when we were speaking, those baby steps that we're taking towards our end goal of becoming a mid-tier copper producer at some point in the future. There is a lot of work going on in the background, and I think we suffered as a company from not telling people what we were doing at regular intervals and showing that we were executing on our business plan.
I mean, to that point, do you think there were lessons learned? Because obviously, people talk about, there had to be a massive rollback. There was dilution. There was what was that a factor of? Was it just copper price at the time makes life difficult, or were there other things that or the company that you have learned from?
I think the copper price being lower than the expectation of the business plan when they started the development strategy definitely hurts. I think the lessons learned are small scale development strategies are somewhat more challenged. The rule of economies of scale in mining is certainly something that you need to bear in mind. There is a point in time where economies of scale do help you in terms of your economic returns, because there are just a significant amount of fixed costs in these businesses. But I think really the copper price going against the company during that key ramp-up period is probably the biggest issue that the company faced. I think we have very much changed that mindset and strategy, but it's been driven by the success of our exploration at Marimaca. This is a project that is good enough to be developed as a standalone project. It doesn't need to have that bootstrapping strategy to bring it into production. It should be developed as a standalone.
Okay, so let's just, if you don't mind, just stick with the kind of copper price component, because you look back over the past couple of decades, or even 3 decades or so. Copper's a tough one to call. So what are you going to have to do to fail safe your project? Because as you say, it's of a certain size. It's good, but copper projects people tend to see as large capex, large scale operations. You've got a relatively low capex, sort of low entry point, but people will expect more. So exploration is going to deliver so much of that. What else can you do?
Well, I mean, in terms of the project itself, it is one of these very rare projects that is developable regardless of the copper price. So if you look at the PEA results at a $2.50 a pound copper price, we're talking a 20% IRR. Obviously, it helps if the copper price goes up, but from a purely economic and financing perspective, it is one of those very rare projects that doesn't really need the copper price to incentivize it to be built. And that is a very rare thing in the copper industry. We've seen some of our analysts do benchmarking work across the copper universe, and it shows that there are very few projects with these sorts of economic metrics. So in many ways, it's future-proofed itself by just being an outstanding economic asset. Obviously, we would like it to be bigger, and so 2021 is very much about focusing on exploration and growth and trying to find things that will take us into that next tier of copper projects. And then really doing the fundamental technical work to make sure that we de-risk the future execution of this project is paramount for us. And so we continue to do metallurgical testing. Our final phase of met testing is underway right now. That'll be delivered in the first half of this year. We'll do a feasibility study on that project, which is about a little bit more engineering. We're going to continue to do the environmental and permitting work. So we're gradually, as you say, taking those steps towards the point in time where we're shovel ready and ready to start building this project.
Okay, well, let's talk about the all of the different steps and the order of play for 2021, because we've got lots of questions in about that. Because why I want to understand that is because if I look at your share price, you haven't really moved because you haven't really done too much since we last spoke. So it's popped up a little bit. You've got a strange scenario where your institutional holding is, significant. The recent raise may have helped with that. in terms of liquidity, etc. But it'll only get going once people start seeing what you're going to be able to deliver. So if you don't mind, talk us through how you see 2021 playing out.
So at this stage, we're all hands to the pump on the exploration side. So we've got teams on the ground doing surface geochem, geological mapping. We're out doing IP surveys to the two targets further to the north from Marimaca. We have done IP surveys at Marimaca. We're just finalising that information, and we're hopeful that we'll release that to the market in the next week or two. So there's a lot of work that's going on the ground, really leading us up to the point where we start drilling our first drill holes in these targets. We're expecting that the drill contractors will be mobilised by the end of the month or in the first week of February, which is around the time that we guided. COVID not becoming an issue between now and then, and so we will certainly be drilling the Marimaca sulfide target, i.e. the sulfide extension below Marimaca itself, followed by one or two of the northern targets by the end of the first quarter of this year, we would expect. So there is going to be a lot of exploration news flow in the first 6 months of the year.
Okay, but you've raised this 20 million, well, just shy of 29 million Canadian in early December. How much are you allocating? What's the time frame?
So initial first pass drilling program, we're looking at $4 million US. Obviously, we have more money than that available for drilling, but the way that we're going to do it is, as I always say, it's a gating process. So we spend a little bit to start, get some information, and then reassess where we're going to continue to spend money. And so, $4 million is our initial budget for that. We do have a number of land payments and option payments due this year, so there's budget set aside for that.
How much?
And then about $10 million for the year in terms of option and land payments. So it is quite significant in terms of the budget that we have today.
Right. So that's the sort of long-standing thing. What's is that towards the end of the year, or is it throughout the year? How does it work?
It's throughout the year, but it's majority back-ended towards the third and fourth quarter.
Okay. So what do you think $4 million is going to get you in terms of putting that in the ground?
So in terms of meterage, we're looking at, call it about 12,000 metres in total, maybe slightly less than that, of which we'll split 6,000 metres of the Marimaca sulfide target and then 6,000 metres to the targets to the north of the Marimaca sulfide target on Mercedes and Cindy and Llanos.
Right. And so what does that do? What exactly are you going to do? Because your PA is, like I say, it's good. To get the feasibility done, you're going to, I guess, have to tighten up on a bit of a few of those numbers. What precisely are you doing?
So the objective of this exploration program is we believe that there is obviously something potentially significant sitting below Marimaca. So the objective of the first phase of drilling is really to give us an idea of whether or not, several of the drill holes that we drilled in previous campaigns went through the bottom of the oxide project and into the sulfide zone. And there were some very interesting drill holes in there, which we've never gone back and tested or followed up. So we're going back to test that and work out whether or not there is going to be something that is potentially economically interesting for us, something that can really increase the scale of this project. What we know about deposits in this region is the oxide is typically a relatively small portion of the overall system. And so if like in many of the other big projects in this area, there is a meaningful sulfide extension, it really could take this project from being a decent sized project into something that is really quite large and quite exciting from a new discovery perspective. And then to the north, the objective is very much focused on oxides first. And the reason we're focused on oxides is from a strategic perspective, if we find more oxides, then that can immediately come into the development strategy of the Marimaca project. Whereas if we find sulfides, then it meaningfully changes our development strategy. Capital costs go up, potentially. The treatment process is completely different. And so we would need to think about how we would change our development strategy. So we think that in those northern targets, finding a meaningful oxide at surface really has the potential to add significant value in relatively short order. So it's very much Marimaca sulfide depth extension first, followed by oxides in the north. Then there's several other oxide targets that we'd like to go and drill as well.
Right, and obviously for you that kind of keeps the cost down. And in terms of making yourself attractive to people looking at you, potential partners, we'll call it, or whether it be takeover or whatever. So it's in your control as to what you go and hunt around and look for. So given that you're chasing oxides, does that tell us that you want to get into production yourselves and you're not going to be talking to other people?
I think we certainly wouldn't rule out talking to other groups. And I think given that this is one of only 2 new copper discoveries made in the world in the last 5 years, we are obviously on everybody's radar because everyone wants to know whether or not this is going to get significantly bigger. And so we'll continue to have conversations with people in the industry, and we'll continue to talk, mainly because we know that as we develop this and potentially find something new, having different sources of financing available to us potentially benefits our shareholders. So we'll continue to keep our options open. But yes, as a company, we are very mindful of the fact that we need to have a team in place and the objective in place of taking this project into production ourselves. And whether or not that happens will be dictated by our major shareholders and the market to a certain extent.
What have they got the stomach for? Because obviously Greenstone have been in this a while, right? I know you've got Michael Hawthorne as chairman. How much are they driving the strategy, and how much is the operational team driving the strategy? I mean, how do those guys work? Because obviously Greenstone, they're invested in a lot of things at the moment. They're stretched. So how do you guys work out the best course of action to suit other shareholders, not just Greenstone?
That's exactly the conversations that we're having at the board, which is presenting multiple different value creation strategies, so that we're not going down a single strategy and thereby not extracting full value out of what is an exciting asset for us. In terms of Greenstone's involvement, I mean, they're an incredibly supportive shareholder. They've been, you remember at the start of last year, the start of the pandemic, they gave us, along with Tembo, a working capital facility, which really kept us alive and stopped us from having to do a significantly dilutive capital raise when we were trading at about $1 a share. And then subsequently led us to be able to get into this capital raise at $3.15 a share. So really very helpful. They are a voice in the board and a shareholder that we obviously listen to, but they're certainly not dictating the strategy in terms of how the company moves forward. And we spent a lot of time at the end of last year with the board discussing the various permutations of strategy that will come about as a result of either positive or negative exploration results, and how we go about creating additional value. And I think at this point in time, there's nothing set in stone, because what we know is it's a movable feast based on whether or not we have exploration success.
So what are their drivers then? What are their expectations of the company? Because, like I say, they've invested in a lot of other companies, and we're very conscious of the kind of conversations they ran with other companies around that time when they were giving you a $6 million facility. They were doing that for other companies. So things became quite tight for them. Did they take any part of this $29 million that you did recently, or nearly $29 million you did recently?
Yeah, they did a significant amount of it, slightly less than their total preemptive right. They remain a very supportive shareholder. What is their long-term objective? Well, obviously they're a private equity fund with a closed-ended fund, and so at some point they will need a liquidity event. But what my discussions with them has shown is that they're very open-minded about how they achieve that result. And the easiest solution for them is obviously a cash buyer comes over and offers to buy out their stake. But there are multiple other strategic options available to us as a company to create value for them and also keep our destiny in our own hands. And we're certainly seeing that in a rising copper price environment, those opportunities are increasing, not decreasing. So we're pretty excited about 2021. We're very excited at the fact that we have an amazing asset from which to leverage ourselves into more value creating opportunities. It's about me getting out and finding those opportunities and presenting them to our shareholders and showing them that there are ways that we can control the asset and continue to create value.
Okay, well let's talk about that, because last time we talked about liquidity was one of your issues, because you had so much institutional. It's kind of bizarre. You've come at it sort of volte-face in a way. So have you been able to bring more retail into the story as a result of this recent raise?
A little bit more retail as a result of the recent raise, certainly more retail interest buying in, but the capital raise was not of the scale that we really needed to bring in a lot of retail. So I think there is still work to do on the liquidity side. There's still work to do on the continuing to improve the register more from an ownership perspective than anything else. Optically, the market likes a little bit more free float, and so that's what we're targeting to do. We then juggle that, I guess, with our ongoing need for financing and the fact that we need to find reasonable levels of financing from long-term supportive shareholders. So a bit of a catch-22, but we continue through the struggle.
Yeah, always a catch-22. So what are you going to do about it in 2021? You've got enough capital to do what you need now, right? But at some point, once some of this information comes through, you've got a different set of decisions to make. And I guess you're going to tell me you've got lots of options about how you raise capital in the marketplace. So should people look, if Greenstone are part of the solution, and if they do sell down to help with liquidity, that should be seen as a positive sign, you're going to say, rather than an overhang. They're supportive.
Well, I don't think you'll see them sell their shares, but they just may not elect to invoke their preemptive rights on any future capital raises. So I don't think there's any risk of Greenstone going out into the market and starting to sell their shares, because I think I can safely say that this is perceived by Greenstone to be one of their best assets in their portfolio. And so they continue to be, I continue to have to fight them off putting more money in rather than the other way around. So I think, yes, you would perceive it as a positive. They've already followed their money once. And I think they recognise that bringing in new supportive long-term shareholders is beneficial to the company as a whole. Okay.
So you must have a view of the copper price and the copper market for 2021 or longer. So what do you think is going to be happening this year? Is there going to be any pullback?
I've been surprised at how quickly it's moved. It's just been incredible. I think I said, in September, I was surprised at how quickly it had moved, and it carried on. Everything that I'm reading is suggesting that 2021 is an extremely bullish year. I have always kept in mind that the trend is your friend in these sorts of things, and so I'd expect a bit of strength to continue in 2021. How bullish am I? Well, I remain bullish on copper, but do I expect this kind of strength to continue or higher than this for 2022 and 2023? Potentially a little bit of a pullback, more of a normalization, get us back to the levels that we're at today if we see a really strong spike in prices this year. But I certainly think we're going to see copper prices north of $3 for quite a while, just based on all of the information that I'm reading and the increasing levels of demand. Obviously, changing government in the US and a change in a control of the upper and lower house, allowing them to put out this green stimulus bill. Who knows what impact that's going to have, but it all points to a fairly positive outlook for copper.
Okay. Well, Hayden, thanks very much for the update. I'm kind of keen to follow your story this year, because I think you're right. 2020 was about housekeeping, getting ducks in a row, whatever cliche you want to throw at it. Okay, so looking forward, what are the things you think people should be looking for, which are going to really make a difference to your share price? Because if I look back over the last 9 months, it hasn't really moved. You saw a big pops of June, July last year, but it hasn't really moved since then. People are waiting for the next thing. So what do you think that is?
Well, the biggest items are all exploration. We have multiple targets that we will be drilling in the first half of this year, and each one of those presents an opportunity for us to make a significant difference to our share price. And I think it's safe to say that if we drill 1 or 2 or 3 very good holes in any of those targets, you'd be hard pressed to see these sorts of levels again. So we are very much on the exploration focus. There will continue to be news flow from the development side, obviously the final phase of met testing and all of that, but it's not going to be as important as the exploration. So really keep an eye out for our exploration results, which should start flowing at some point in towards the end of Q1, early Q2, I expect.
Okay, fantastic. Well, look, stay in touch. Let us know how you get on with things, especially with the drilling. I think people are excited to see what you guys can do. So I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks very much for having me.